All right, Northwoods Cardboard Gang, thanks for joining me today. As we're going to be taking another look at the CGC changes that are coming forward in the Pokemon TCG and also in CGC, sports cards, and all the other factors when it comes down to CGC grading. So today, as you can see, I'm outside. It's been a beautiful day. Figured it'd be a good day just to sit out here and have a talk with you guys. Take some of the comments from the last video on Wednesday and go over them with you guys so you guys can see a little bit of a response in person. And I'll pull up your comments and we'll discuss them. Most of the comments right on pace. A lot of you guys had a lot of the same feelings I did. Some comments had some good rebuttals, and today I'm going to sit there and discuss those comments with you guys also. So stay tuned, relax, and we'll be right back. Alright guys, once again, I'm Andy with Northwoods TCG, and today we're going to be outside here relaxing and talking about the Pokemon TCG, and particularly CGC grading and what's going on with the whole debacle with their changes. Now, once again, there were some really good comments that came through, and, some of them were very, very much on the same side as I was. Some of them had some really good rebuttals. They were all good questions, nothing mean, nothing nasty, but just a good discussion point overall. So today I'm going to go over 4 of them. I have 4 of the comments that I really wanted to discuss a little bit and just give you a little bit more perspective on my point of view and kind of talk about that. So we're going to be sitting out here. You might hear some chickens crow, you might hear some ducks, but overall we're just going to sit out here and relax a little bit before the evening's over and talk about Pokemon, which is a lot of fun. So first question I got here, I got it up on my phone, is we're going to talk about is from Techno4More. There will still be CGC 9.5 labeled as Mint Plus. Another person responded to this. I'm going to put up there. It looks like you actually read their article on their website, unlike this guy. So, talking about that, I do know that they're doing 9.5, Mint Plus. That wasn't even a question. What is going away is the 9.5 blue label. And that's not even completely true either after the interview they did slightly after I recorded that video. What they're actually doing is that you're going to get the Gem Mint 9.5 or 9.5 Mint Plus if you send your cards in the next 2 months under that $5 tier. If not, you're going to stay at the 9.5. So if you are thinking of doing it, I would suggest doing it sooner than later. But to me, this is another debacle that if you're going to send this in, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, even 2 years down the road, you should be able to get that upgrade. Otherwise, to me, it just became a complete and total pay to grade type system, because now the only way you're getting the 10 Gem Mint 10 is if you send it in 2 months, you spend $5, and to die you get a 10. They're not going to regrade it. They're not going to do anything like that. It's just strictly a pay upgrade to go from a 9.5 to a 10 Gem Mint. I don't agree with that. Overall, I do know that there's that 9.5. Why wouldn't they just stay in the 9.5? What did you change in this grading scale that it didn't stay at that 9.5 Mint Plus? Why didn't the 9s move up to the 9.5s? Why didn't the 8.5s move up to 9s? If you're going to be moving the 9.5s to 10 in 2 months with $5, then why isn't that available with all of the cards moving forward? They should all move up. If you change the grading scale to where 9.5 moves up, then 9 should move up. 8 should move up, 8.5 should move up. They should all move up. Theoretically, somewhere right around maybe 5 or 4, it would start to dissipate to where they wouldn't, potentially. But realistically, that's what we should be seeing. So yes, I do know that there is a 9.5. I understood that. My point in the video was not the new 9.5 Mint Plus grading. It was the removal of the blue labels, or the opportunity to take those blue labels and upgrade them into the Gem Mint, Gem Mint 10 versus the 9.5 Mint Plus. So that was just my disagreement with that, and that's where I'm standing on it, is why those blue labels move up for no particular reason. Besides, we're just giving you a bonus for sending us your cards so that you can get them reholdered. That's realistically, and a better grade. Don't forget that. So that was my point, is yes, I know they're not getting rid of the 9.5. They're still, that would not make any sense to get rid of the 9.5. Because you're still doing 8.5, 7.5, 6.5. Why would you get rid of the 9.5 in the grading scale? You're not just going to go from 9 to 10 and then the perfect 10. It just wouldn't make sense. So overall, yes, you are correct. There is going to be the 9.5 Gem Mint, but my gripe is that the blue ones are currently available to go up a grade with no particular reason whatsoever. And technically, as of July 1st, there may not be very many of them left. So you're going to have to hedge your bets on what you want to do there. So other than that, we're going to move into the next question. All right, so the next question I got, I'm going to put on screen here, is going to go from Thomas Cook 7243. CGC isn't going anywhere. They just combined forces and grew their collective cross-selling collectibles customer base. For example, CGC is the company for the comic book grading. This just makes the move of a player in the space. In terms of the 9.5 to 10 grading, they could play this one of two ways. Wait to see if the 9.5 market upticks, or push forward to grading them to 10s. Ultimately, I think the value of either will become the same. New CGC 10s, however, the market dictates. People will buy 9.5s knowing that they can get a 10 for $5. The only people that will lose are those selling the 9.5s at the old value. So overall, I do know why they merged, and to me the merge makes sense, and even the labels make sense. I'm not opposed to the new labeling system. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever, and them merging absolutely makes sense as a company to have two specific companies that pretty much do the exact same thing. You know, CSG is doing all the sports cards and that end of things, and then you have CGC doing the grading for the, you know, TCGs and comic books. It really was kind of a haphazard system, especially when submitting both. I have even friends myself that do collecting in both sports cards and in TCGs, and they got to submit everything separately to each one of those companies. So once again, the merger isn't an issue. I don't see any problem with that. Overall, I don't know how it's going to collectively help them in the space. It's not going to gain them any market share because they do that. Even changing the labels and stuff, I don't think would be enough to create more of a market share for them. There's just no reason for that market share for CGC to merge, and all of a sudden they're going to get another 3% of the market space. That's just not going to be something that's going to happen. Realistically, if a company in grading is trying to get more market space, consistency, advertisement, and being the standard is the way to do it. Becoming a standard is more important than changing your labeling and merging companies when you're trying to capture that grading space. And it's the same with any business at the end of the day. Consistency and being the same, keeping your work ethic high, keeping the high standards is going to get you a lot more business in the space than actually merging a company and just changing your logo, for example. So changing your overall labels on the slabs is not going to get you more market share. So I understand why they did it. It just uniformly makes things smoother. Putting new labels on it, I get it. You're trying to conform to, you know, AGS and PSA, and then of course CGC now will fall into that uniformity. Beckett will still have their differences, but that's fine. I mean, there's no big deal in that part of it. Now, when it comes to once again, I'm just warning everybody from my understanding and what I've done on research now on this, it sounds like you have 2 months to get these cards graded. They're not allowing you to necessarily wait for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years to buy a 9.5 blue label card and go send it to CGC and get it graded as a 10. It sounds like you got 2 months, you just got 2 months to do this. That's it, $5. And when that $5 deal runs out in 60 days after July 1st, then you're going to run into the situation where you are not going to be getting that Gem Mint 10. You're going to get the 9.5 Mint Plus. So like I said, that's that pay to grade thing. I don't agree with that. That to me is just BS. That's a money grab overall. So that overall will be a factor. I do think that this is going to hit those Gem Mint 10s extremely hard. The pristine 10s, it's not going to affect very much for pricing. That's going to get a premium just because, once again, those are the perfect 10s. But that Gem Mint 10, I think, is going to get very, very murky when it comes down to it. CGC is creating this murky part of it where you are going to be sitting there looking at, okay, I've got this card. Was it a 9.5 or should it be a 9.5 and now I've got a 10? Did someone pay $5 to get the 10? Or was this a card that was legitimately a 10 to start out with and they just reholdered it with the new label? That's going to cause a big murky area when it comes down to it. And I understand PSA did the exact same thing, right? PSA changed their grading scale in 2021. I think that they changed their scale because they saw modern cards were grading really easy compared to vintage cards, and thus we were seeing that market kind of spike. They were getting a ton of 10s, a lot of 10s were coming out, so inevitably they harshened that grading scale to reduce the number of 10s and keep that population a little bit tighter. Now, Do I agree with them doing that? Not necessarily. I mean, I know why they did it, and they've explained it pretty well on why they did that. But overall, I do believe in consistency. Once again, if I'm looking at a grading company and I lose consistency, it becomes very difficult for me to rely on them because it's a big problem at the end of the day. So once again, I do agree with you. I think that overall, I think the 9.5s and the 10s are probably going to start to blend together for the pricing of these cards. Even the new 9.5s and the 10s and the old 9.5s, you know, they're all going to kind of merge into kind of a price point there. So you're going to have a big bundle of stuff. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the market dictates this and how it kind of rolls out at the end of the day and corrects itself. Because somewhere there's going to be a correction on it. It may take years. And if you were buying CGC cards, it may take years for this to all straighten out. It'll be interesting to see how long it actually takes for people to start feeling confident in CGC cards again. Even newer grading ones coming out with that 10, 10 Gem Mint 10 is going to make a little bit of in the back of people's heads that, hey, was this a 9.5 and it got graded up? It's going to take a little bit to sort that out. So once again, stay tuned on that. It's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of pans out. And that's kind of my feelings is we're going to see kind of a conglomeration of probably those three price ranges are all going to kind of merge into one, at least for a little while. And we might see some separation as time goes on and CGZ continues to grade. Moving on to the next question. All right, so the next comment comes from Monotone Cards 7078. To me, this change is a short-term pain for a long-term gain. If they don't make any changes, they would be guaranteed to be behind forever. CGC is probably making these changes looking 20 years into the future, not how it will affect their revenue over the next 20 days. If no companies make the changes without outrage, you might as well just ask every grading company to shut down now and give the PSA the only grading company. So I'm going to go over the first part of this. I don't know how CGC's behind. I've never seen CGC be behind. To me, they're always going to be behind PSA no matter what you do. But overall, I feel that Beckett and CGC are probably on even platforms. If you wanted the subgrades and you wanted to do it a little bit cheaper with more notoriety, you went with CGC and they had a cleaner slab. Their slabs are smaller. They were easier to stack. They look cleaner in my opinion. But the only reason you went to BGS is that you were actually looking for that black label. That black label is the only reason that you really go to BGS. That's the only time you're really going to have a breakout price on that card is if you can get a black label at BGS. And we all know how difficult that black label actually is to get. So overall, trying to compete with a company that's been in business for 35 years, because PSA came out in 1991, so we're at 32 years of business, and only being a 3-year-old company and expecting to be ahead of PSA is just not going to happen. Do I think that they had a really good market share and had a good stake? Yeah, I think that they were doing extremely well, especially the first year that they opened. They were very consistent. They were right on par. Their grading was really good, and then they realized that they could capture more market share if they loosened up the 10s, released more of them. We started seeing more of those pop up, and that was the first big change that CGC made on their scales. And to me, that was one of those big disagreements that I had. And that kind of set me off on CGC, that they were only about a year and a half old, and all of a sudden they changed their scales for grading one time already. And now here we are another year and a half, and we're changing it completely again on the scales and changing over the whole format. Once again, I do agree that changing the label was okay. I like the CGC label personally because it showed a difference. That you could see it with CGC. Their slabs also make them very distinct, but the label itself was also another one of those factors. It was really good. I enjoyed the CGC labels, especially with the subgrades, and them getting rid of the subgrades to me was another very damaging thing. I think if they would have reduced the price of the subgrades, where it was maybe a $5 add-on versus a $15 add-on to the card price, more people would have used that function, especially at lower end tiered cards, and that would have maybe drawn more people in and maybe made that subgrade more demanding or more appealing to a lot of people. Even myself, when I sent cards in originally to CGC, unless I knew it was going to be a really high-end card, such as a Charizard or, a WotC card that I was really good condition, it was very difficult for me to go, yeah, I'm going to send this in and try and maximize that with that subgrade because there just wasn't enough margin inside of it to do so. Even the subgrades having them didn't create enough margin to dictate that. So once again, that's one of my feelings is that I think that a lot of people have this feeling that they did all this stuff and now that was going to give them the leading edge and advantage to being in front of PSA, and it's never going to happen. PSA still, if you look at the numbers, runs about 90 to 95% of the market share. They're the best, they're the oldest grading company out there, and they've been there forever. So everybody has been advertising for them for years. People have been sending, I was sending PSA cards back in 2000. So when I came back into the hobby, the first place I went to was PSA. It's just, that's your mindset. That's where a lot of people go, and people go there because they sell better. Now, you're realistically fighting over 5 to 10% of the market share with BGS and maybe AGS as it continues to grow and gets notoriety. If it continues to be consistent and we start seeing some really good things continuing out of AGS, maybe they'll start taking it. But really, you've got those three companies fighting for market share, and they could carve out a little bit more from PSA, but they're not going to do it by changing their logos, changing their slab labels, and merging the company. Once again, merging a company is not going to give you that. Consistency was the way to do it. I liked CGC when it first came out, when they first started advertising, and then the first year and a half that they were in business, because they were consistent. That perfect 10 was extremely difficult to get, just like a BGS black label. To me, that makes consistency, and they were consistently like that. I actually was one of the people that enjoyed CGC at that time. I was looking for it for my business to try and get cards in. But also on top of it, they were consistent, and I love consistency. The more consistent you are, the more likely I am to use your company. So that's exactly where I'm at on that, and that's the way you take a market share. Be consistent, keep your grading the same. Don't do pay to grade. So example, before, you had to pay for the subgrades in order to get a perfect 10 originally. They changed on that, and now we have to pay $5 and shipping costs to get our cards upgraded from a 9.5 to a 10 Gem Mint 10. Why? Because they just feel like doing it as a bonus for them changing their labels, and as a I'm sorry for changing things. And that's realistically what it feels like. But it doesn't make sense, and it's not ethical when it comes down to the grading scales to just pay for a grade. That now you're completely defeating the purpose of grading, and you might as well go down to GMA. Realistically, that's about where you're at, in my opinion. When it comes down to it, you're down with one of the lower ones now. That if you'll pay me more money, just stick a 10 in the envelope, and the grader will give you all CGC 10s. That's what it feels like at the end of the day. So it's one of those things that's really a complex look at it. But overall, I don't feel that they were behind, because you're comparing yourself to the biggest grading company out there. I feel that you were doing extremely well. CGC was doing extremely well for its size, for its age of the company only being 3 years, and they were starting to carve out a pretty good market share until they started screwing up themselves, changing the scale, started putting through all of these misprint cards that weren't misprint cards. They started giving special logos to people who were stealing cards and getting them graded early. All of these things were occurring, and that was things that were hurting their business. If they would have removed that kind of stuff and left this alone, left the grading scale alone, and even if they changed the label, fine, it'd be okay, and they would have done really well if they were to keep that consistency and get rid of all the weird, goofy stuff they were trying to do to try and get more customer base. That wasn't exactly good customer base to be getting. So once again, that's just my feelings on that, and once again, I don't think that they were ever really behind, because they're never going to be catching PSA unless PSA really falls on their face. PSA would really have to screw up, and people would really have to all of a sudden switch their demand to CGC for the sales market before they would ever be able to even carve out a large portion of that actual market share for graded cards. So, all right, we're going to move on to the next comment. So the next comment that I have here comes from Wolfie K's 1610. I think there's too much darn worry about this update from CGC. Everyone always looked at CGC 9.5s and said that's basically a PSA 10. The blue was a love or hate. CGC was the only grading that Pokemon, only grading Pokemon for 2 years. They'll be as fine as long as they don't quit. PSA has consistency and QC issues, and they're considered number one. All proves all grading is a crapshoot. And I agree, grading is a crapshoot. I've always said that. Grading is just in the eyes of the grader. overall, we've even proven that several times. Several YouTubers have proven that, where you could pull a card out of PSA and you can send it right back. Even Leonhardt, I laughed at that with Beckett. You would take a card out of the slab, he'd break a card out of a slab, he'd send it in, the surface would get better, the edges would get better, but the centering would get worse. Well, the centering is the one measurable tolerance when it comes down to a card. You can measure the centering, and it's the only one that you can't really dispute it. It is what it is. It's not a visual thing, it's a measurable thing, and that would get worse or change considerably, like a whole point. It would go from a 10 to a 9, or from an 9.5 to an 8, or from an 8.5 to a 9.5. It was just crazy the amount that centering would change. Once again, that's a consistency issue, in my opinion. They all have consistency issue, especially when you have humans doing it. The problem is that I have with consistency issues is that your consistency, when it comes down to grading, is never 100%, no matter what company it is. I'm even skeptical AGS will copy itself every single time that it grades a card. It's going to be yet to be seen. But when you look at it with a consistency, what I'm talking about is consistency of that grading scale. PSA has changed that scale one time in 30 plus years. CGC now has changed it twice in 3 years. It's been 3 years they've been grading TCG cards. So realistically, they have changed that scale 3 times in 3 years, or 2 times in 3 years. Every year and a half, we're going to go through this change of scale, and they're going to completely revamp where your positioning is with these cards. And that's the bigger question is how many times are they going to do it yet? Are they comfortable with where this is? Are they going to see enough revenue by changing this around to bring in the money that they're looking for the actual gradable cards? Or are they going to fall short and they're going to go, okay, we're going to reformulate this again and we're going to change it again in another year and a half after we do an analysis on how well this is performing? We're not getting enough, cards, so let's open it up for more 10s. And that's what it sometimes feels like they keep doing. They just keep opening the valve and on the floodgate and just let a little bit more out every single time in order to try and please the people that are grading through CGC, which is not a kosher way of actually doing grading. Once again, I would much rather see consistency in my grading, that I know if I buy this card today and I go and grade it 10 years from now, break it out and grade it, and then 10 years from now, that the grading is going to be consistent, that I'm going to be within a half point of that grade. I'm okay with even a half point. If you're doing half grades and you're going 10 to 9.5 and it kind of bounces back and forth, I get that. That's all visual, especially when you have humans doing it. There's human error and all those other things that go along with it. So once again, you're going to have some variance when you got a person's eye on it, and how much coffee they drank and who made them mad that day or who made them happy that day. So there's always those consistency issues, and that's going to continue to happen as long as human factors involved. But when you can sit there and change the scale so drastically that potentially I can get a perfect 10 or a gem mint 10, 2 years ago, 3 years ago when they first opened, and now if I graded that card, or 9, let's just go to the 9. So I graded a 9 3 years ago, and now I sent that 9 in and graded it now 3 years later, and now it's a 10. Just because they've loosened up that grading scale and made things better, that's definitely not a kosher way of doing it, because now you've completely formulated to where your consistency changes so much over time, your opinion becomes invaluable, or there's no value to your opinion. So when there's no value to your opinion or to your grading system anymore, that's where you start to lose business more than anything. And that's where I feel that CGC has gotten to. One change of the scales, I think you would have been fine. That was even a turnoff for me, how quickly they did it, especially when you're new in a market and you're trying to make a name for yourself, you're branding yourself, you're building a reputation, you're building all these things, and then all of a sudden you completely change the whole formula only a year and a half into business after you've branded yourself and made yourself there. And then you start seeing the QC issues like we talked about with PSA. All of them have QC issues, right? They're not going to catch all of the stamp cards. So, for example, the first edition stamps. All of them had first edition stamps get through except for Beckett. I never saw a Beckett one, but I'm sure probably even they let one go at some point. AGS didn't catch it because, of course, their computer algorithm doesn't realize if it's close enough to the location, they're going to say it's there, and they're going to examine the stamp, and yep, it's there, it's good. CGC, PSA, and all them, they probably should have caught them because human eye should be able to catch that more than an actual algorithm on a computer, or as their computer grading goes with AGS. So, like I said, inconsistencies like that are going to occur. CGC, look at how many line cards and how many falsified misprint cards. That Charizard that had a lamination on it, lamination pulled off part of the sticker and got it put in as a misprint. I mean, it's just crazy the amount of stuff that gets through CGC when you want to talk about consistency with that factor also. You know, quality control or QC is not that good comparatively to what it was the first year and a half that they were doing business. And it's continually seeming to get worse. Plus, you're letting illegal cards go through. Plus, you're letting, you know, or can't say illegal, but they're letting cards go through early and then they're stamping them as early release cards. So you're giving them a stamp that almost makes the graded slab a an oddity. So now you've got cards out there with an oddity on the slabs, which may actually add value to someone who stole these cards. Not saying it will. Some people might think that you stole the cards, but in the long run, so let's just say 10 years down the road, when people get away from all these thefts that are happening in early grading, they might go, "Wow, that's kind of cool, early release card." You know, type deal. So it's just one of them things. I don't agree with some of the things that they did in the first year and a half when they started trying to capture more market, but they weren't trying to capture the market by being consistent and being on the par. They were trying to capture the market by grabbing all the oddity things, the things that PSA wouldn't grade because they have morals and they wouldn't grade these cards, or they started making misprints up and misprints that didn't really exist, and they didn't do the research on what these misprints were, or they didn't understand or look at the card being a misprint or damaged, and then they'd send it off as a misprint when it was actually a damaged card because someone checked the misprint box. So there's a lot of issues that CGC has got to work through in this point in time. This was just kind of one of them things that was another issue that's kind of moved forward, and it's going to continue to be an issue. I think overall we're going to see really big issues futuristically when it comes down to it. So once again, that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. Like I said, I just want to cover them 4 little comments because they were really good points and really good views and aspects at it. But I think overall, you know, they're defending CGC, and I get it. I mean, some people are going to enjoy CGC, and if you do, continue using them. I don't have a problem with anybody using them. I still will probably buy CGC slabs in the future. It's probably not going to stop me from purchasing them, but I'm probably going to get them regraded through like PSA if I do get them. That's probably going to be my future move on them. So I'm not against buying them, but I'm definitely not necessarily for keeping them in the long run. I think that there's going to be... I don't think this is going to be the end of the road for CGC. I think that these changes are going to continue to happen because, once again, they're not looking at it for the consistency side for getting market share and taking the time. They're not taking the time to build a business. They're not taking the time to create a product line that's a good quality and keeps up with consistency. They're looking to try and grab market share as fast as they can and get it to them as fast as they can, no matter how they do it. And when you do those kind of things, and when that's your aspect, you're going to continue to try and formulate different ways of changing it to do that. And that's my fear with CGC now at this point, is they think they're going to carve out more, but they're actually probably hurting themselves more in the long run when it comes down to those particular items. So once again, that's just my opinion on these things. And, you know, my opinion probably doesn't hold a lot of weight, but those are definitely the issues I see CGC having to battle through in the future. Is they're going to have to work a lot on their reputation now at this point with consistency and really watching their quality. You know, you're going to do these changes, you got to make sure your quality's there. QC's got to be really strong, and you have to get that consistency back. And it might be 3 to 5 years before some of the people that they've just kind of screwed around with come back in and start actually being part of their company again and give them another chance. Or some of them may never come back. You may never see some of these people make that walk back into the company just because of what's happened to them with the current situations in CGC. So once again, 20 minutes of pain sometimes in a business, you know, or 20 days of pain in a business is sometimes more damning than waiting the time period to try and get your consistency and get yourself built up in the market. So overall, like I said, guys, I just want to kind of chill here, relax. It's a nice day. It's been hot out, and now it's kind of cool outside. Looks like we might be getting some rain, which we really desperately need. And so if you did make it this far in the video, once again, let me know what you think about doing this video style, just kind of chilling out here in the garden, relaxing. As the year goes on, it'd be kind of cool to see the plants behind me kind of get bigger and bigger. And let me know what you think of this in the comments. Also, let me know what you guys think of the overall video about CGC. I mean, do you like the labels? Do you not like the labels? Do you want CGC to continue to move forward with this change, or would you like them to stop and continue on this old course with maybe the new labels? Keep the subgrades and continue to move forward that way. let me, like I said, kick that out in the comments. And also, if you've made it this far into the video, make sure you hit that subscribe, guys. It's fantastic if you could do that. Also, be sure you hit the notify, so when videos like this do come up, at least you'll be notified that they're up. And last but not least, hit that like button, guys. It's greatly appreciated to help out the channel, but that like button, it does a lot for us at the end of the day, and it really helps the channel out. As always, I will put up these 2 videos for you afterwards, so you guys can check these out. And we will see you next time here on Northwoods TCG.